Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Indy Real Estate Investing Podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Tallman, and with me once again today is our attorney, a partner with the law firm Thrasher, Bushman, and Vogel, and that's Laura Conway. Welcome back to the show, Laura.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Yeah, it's good to see you. You and I spoke about a year. I look back, it's about a year ago, honestly. It's like almost a year to the date that we did a podcast. And back then we talked about the rental caps. I think only Fishers had adopted at that point. But
I think
we
it was
all
Fishers,
knew.
but Carmel was soon behind, yeah.
Oh, yeah. And we knew that they were coming right on the coattails behind Fishers.
Yes.
So in a year, or actually less than that, there's been a lot of things change. I mean, there's been some swift action by the state government. And I brought you on here today to discuss some of those updates on that front, because again, everyone complains that government works slowly, and it feels like they worked pretty quickly here. And I want to get into some of those details. But before we get into the changes, take us back to the beginning, because this goes back a few years ago, I think, when this groundswell started in Hamilton County, where city leaders of both Carmel and Fishers came out and said, we need to put a limit on rental homes. Talk about what happened back then and what was the result.
I think what happened back then is that these city leaders saw that there was a problem, that these large investors were purchasing single family homes within their neighborhoods, within their cities, and using them as rentals. And so the issue is twofold. One of the issues was that this was, as they saw it, limiting the amount of single family homes that were available to purchase just by everyday buyers. So anybody, first buyers or second buyers or whatever, they were seeing that because these investors were coming in and purchasing the properties, other people were not able to, and were driving up the prices in such a way that would limit other people from purchasing anyway, just because the prices in the neighborhoods were going up. These investors a lot of times use cash.
Yeah.
And that would, as a seller, I think people were more likely to go to an investor that's using cash rather than go, and sometimes without doing inspections, sometimes without doing things like that, rather than a normal house purchase. And that was prohibiting people from getting houses. And I think this was pretty rampant in COVID. And I'm going to say there were a lot of investors that were purchasing houses during COVID, especially at the beginning. And that did drive house prices up a lot. Which is not a bad thing. I think for any homeowner, you want to hear that your house price went up. But as a purchaser and as a buyer, it was difficult for them to find housing. And not necessarily because of investors in these particular areas, but it was just difficult to find housing. And I think that these cities sort of glommed onto the big headlines out there that says these big investment firms are purchasing properties. So they figured there was a problem and they wanted to solve it by putting out ordinances that would allegedly fix that problem.
Yeah, and these were citywide caps on the number of homes that were allowed to be rentals of 10% in both Fishers and then Carmel.
Yes.
And look, I sit in a different chair than like a normal homeowner would in Hamilton County. I think they were using, again, these headlines to try to drive out a certain element in those counties, or that county, Fishers and, Carmel, which is Hamilton County. And it wasn't really about the investors, because I think we talked about in the first podcast, these big corporate investors, which did buy a lot of homes, they didn't buy, frankly, most of their buying was not in Hamilton County for the obvious reasons, because Hamilton County is the most expensive median sale price we have in Indiana. They were going to Lawrence Township, Pike Township, other townships around the Beltway. That's where most of their buying happened. And at that point where this thing was actually put into law, these big corporate REITs were net sellers. They were selling more properties than they were buying. So it was a problem that could have existed that was going away, but yet legislation came in and the caps were passed. And then Indiana Association of Realtors, who was the president's Mark Fisher, who has been on this podcast and just wrote an op-ed that I thought was super interesting about this whole situation. His group got involved. They're a pretty powerful lobbying force, and there were some other people that kind of came along. And his contention is that the people that were most hurt by these caps weren't the investors. because I don't think the investors cared. Like, it changed our business, Laura, in almost no way.
No.
Like, we had to inform some of our people that, and they probably knew already, but we sent direct messages, to those people and just said, hey, just by the way, this is here. You're fine because you're you're grandfathered in. But it's not like people were like, wow, I really planned on buying 5 single families in Carmel next year.
Yeah.
Those investors just didn't exist. But what the IAR contends is that the investors weren't hurt. It was, these firefighters, these, the nurses, the young couples who couldn't afford that $450,000 to $475,000 median sale price, but wanted to live in those communities because maybe they worked near there or wanted to take advantage of the schools. They were the ones that were really hurt. I mean, do you see that maybe the city got this backwards, or what's your take on that?
I don't want to say the city got it backwards. My view is the city was trying to fix a problem that wasn't there, and in doing so, it did damage some of these people that would rent otherwise. Like you said, people that own their own businesses. So their income is maybe not sufficiently shown in order to obtain a mortgage. They can afford the monthly rent. They just can't go through the process of getting this conventional mortgage, which is a daunting process, having to provide tax returns, having to provide steady income. Therefore, they would be prevented from renting a property in Carmel and thereby utilizing the Carmel schools or Zion's, or I guess Zionsville is not one of the areas, but any of these areas where that have highly rated school systems that people might want to come into, they are prevented from doing so. I also think it would prevent a lot of executive type people who would move here for a job and need housing and unable to get a house right away. By reducing the number of rentals, we reduce the amount of executive housing too.
True. Absolutely.
And so these big companies that want to bring consultants in or bring other people in that would live here for a short period of time and not necessarily make this their residence are now unable to do so because they can't find the rental housing to do so. I do think that would ultimately have been what happened. I don't know that is what resulted, just because I don't know how many people, like you said, were actually going to buy rental houses or houses to rent in Hamilton County and Fishers and Carmel.
So, Laura, the state legislature listened to the IAR and these other groups that came in and wanted this struck down. And it was pretty remarkable. The state legislature voted 91-3 in favor of striking this down in the House, and then 48-0 in the Senate. That's kind of resounding. Like, you don't normally get that kind of bipartisan agreement on almost anything.
100%. Except I do want to point out where this particular bill was located was within a finance bill. And so when you're trying to find it, it's literally 700 pages or 400 pages. I mean, this is on page, like I had to search, I was searching for the section I wanted. It was like page 261 or something. So I'll go back to why I think it still would have been voted on and would have passed. But I don't believe we can look at that particular vote and say, yes, this is because the entire state Senate or the entire state legislature wanted it.
Right.
It was just part of a much, much, much larger bill that had a lot of different issues in it.
Right.
And so I think, and when that happens, it's a little frustrating to me as an attorney, is this happens a lot, where they stick something within a bill and everybody wants every other part of the bill. And the legislature is supposed to only be able to put items within a bill that are all related. So they can't put something like a criminal part in a bill about family law or something like that.
Gotcha.
That's supposed to be how it is. So they have to show some relation. But I don't want to make anybody believe that our entire legislature would have been okay with this. It just happened to be part of a much larger bill. So I don't think we can draw that conclusion. Now, having said that, I don't know if you remember, gosh, this was a long time ago, when Marion County tried to pass regulations regarding their landlord registration process.
Sure.
They were charging for registration, as well as had a bunch of different ordinances regarding what would happen if a tenant filed a health and hospital complaint and then the landlord tried to evict them.
Right.
And there was all these different sections in that ordinance that said, basically it would be construed against the landlord and it would be very, very,
right?
Yes,
That was,
as a retaliation. It would be,
yeah,
and so even though the tenant might be 5 months behind, who cares? You're clearly retaliating them because they filed a health and hospital complaint,
yeah,
even if that complaint was not substantiated. I mean,
right.
that was how the ordinance was, and the legislature very quickly addressed that and stated that the different municipalities were unable to pass this type of ordinances.
Gotcha.
That they couldn't regulate the landlord-tenant process in that way. Now, in doing so, they did throw a bone to everybody by saying, okay, but it could be deemed a retaliatory action, and it said you can require registration, you just can't require some of the things that they did. So I do think that our particular legislature, the makeup of it is pro property rights,
100%.
and that would be beneficial to landlords in the sense that they don't want the municipalities to have the ability to regulate that relationship between the landlord tenant.
Yeah.
So do I think it still would have passed if it was not part of this big bill? Yes. It would not have been nearly as close, or it would not have been an overwhelming passage like it was, though.
Gotcha. Okay. So that's
given what was part of this.
That's some good context. So those cities still have a lot of power, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, there's registrations that are still going to continue,
Mm-hmm.
presumably in Hamilton County. They're going to obviously they can inspect and enforce safety codes. So are we kind of at a good equilibrium now, you think? Like, where there's still some power for the residents in terms of letting the city help them through issues or, holding landlords more accountable? I'm just curious, like, where do you think we sit today or will sit? Because this doesn't happen until 28, right? When these caps completely go away. But kind of what's your opinion on the overall oversight and regulation that cities have now?
I think it is a good medium. I don't mind the registration requirements. I think that it makes sense. It makes sense that if you have an out-of-state investor, that they are required to have somebody in-state that somebody can contact if there's an issue. If you're an entity, you have to have a registered agent in Indiana.
That's right.
So I don't see why it wouldn't be a similar requirement for landlord-tenant, especially because health and hospital or in Marion County or the different health organizations have the ability to regulate the conditions of property. And so to require that landlord has a person that you could send that information to,
right,
I don't think that's overstepping their bounds.
Yeah.
Do I think it's onerous? Yes. But in particular, I'm not sure how many of your clients you necessarily helped register for the landlord tenant in Fishers specifically, but I know the registration in Fishers asked something about the HOA. So it asked whether or not there was an HOA regulation regarding the rental cap, which I thought was interesting because that wasn't part of the ordinance. That had nothing to do. It said HOAs could do it, but you were never required as part of the ordinance to prove that you were allowed in your HOA also.
Yeah, we help hundreds, I think, of our clients register in Marion County. But Hamilton County, I believe, we aren't able to. The actual homeowner is supposed to. I don't quote me on that, but I think that's so. I don't think we had the experience of going through that. I think that's interesting. So, Laura, let's talk about. I mentioned this briefly earlier, but Fishers and they get to keep enforcing these caps until January of 28. And Mayor Fadness, who I believe is the mayor of Fishers, is it Fishers? He's the mayor of Fishers, right? He was on record as saying he wants to use this time to prove that this policy actually really works, and he'll probably show new data. Is this so? If he comes before the legislature and says, "Hey, look at all these beautiful numbers," is there a chance this thing gets overturned and they say, "Okay, you can go ahead and do your caps," or do you think this is done and over with?
No, I don't think there's a chance it gets overturned.
Yeah.
I don't know what numbers he could show. Because, I mean, I think that the realtors showed ahead of time that they're not, like, there were not any communities that were even over the cap yet.
Right.
And so I'm not sure what difference he would be able to show in this meantime to show it's working. I mean, yeah, you have a cap and you're not, so there's no more rentals allowed.
Right. Right.
Without having something else to show that they would have kept going up, but for this cap, which will be impossible to show because you don't have a like city. I don't see how he could show that it's working.
Do you represent a lot of, or your firm and maybe you represent a lot of HOAs.
Yes.
Is every HOA in Carmel and Fishers going to impose caps, do you think? I mean, is that, I know some of them already have it, but is it
Oh, yeah.
inevitable?
I don't think it's inevitable. And I think that a large number had caps before this.
Oh, yeah.
This was
they
always
did.
a hot button issue in HOAs. I mean, I think our firm in particular, we have one form that is a rental cap form because that it is asked for by so many different HOAs.
Yeah.
And so I don't think that this is necessarily going to make more HOAs do it. I think if the HOA was going to do it, they were either in the process of doing it already, had tried to do it and maybe couldn't get the number of votes they needed. I don't think that this is something that's going to necessarily move HOAs to do so in the future. Now, there is an interesting question that I just thought of is when all these new HOAs, so I have a new neighborhood being built right next to us in Noblesville, and so we don't have a rental cap, but let's say I was in Fishers and these city councils or whoever approves these ordinances with these new neighborhoods, building the new neighborhoods, are they going to require rental caps to be in the declarations?
Oh, wow. Yeah. I mean,
in order to approve the document, because they approve, that's part of the approval process is approving the plat and therefore the declarations of the neighborhood. Is that going to be something that's within them?
Yeah.
I don't know. And I don't know if that's a way to circumvent the requirement that municipalities not regulate it. That'll be interesting to see. That was something I had just thought about because I do find that new neighborhoods, sometimes the developers do put those in there. Sometimes the developers already have that within the declarations before the neighborhood is even formed. And so people are buying into the neighborhood with a rental cap in place.
Yeah. So taking that a step further, I heard this and it just feels so weird to me. I don't know how much you know about it, but so HOAs, I think, are going to become, probably more aggressive in enforcing some rental caps. Maybe not. I mean, there's going to be some that probably are fine and will just continue to operate as is. But I'd heard that if you're an investor who owns a property in one of these HOAs, and let's say the HOA says we want to vote to put a rental cap, that if you don't live in the neighborhood, if you aren't an owner occupant, you may not get a vote, which feels
you won't get a vote.
They won't get a vote.
Yes, that was in the statute. So
wow.
I'll go. Let me just step back a little bit. So I do, like you said, our firm works with HOAs a lot, and we're a member of the Indiana chapter of CAI, which is Community Associations Institute. And so our Indiana chapter actually has like a legislative committee, a LAC committee, that deals with the legislation surrounding HOAs. And so when within the same bill that the legislation we were just talking about passed, there is also a provision within it that passed that states if you do not use the property as a homestead, and there is a very specific definition of homestead in Indiana law, and they reference that specific definition, then you don't have the ability to vote on the rental cap amendments. So previously, the legislature actually had tried to put something in the one of the versions of the statute, and this was something that the LAC committee for CAI was working on, stated that you also couldn't be on the board unless you had the property as your homestead. And so they were really trying to give something to these cities and say, I know we're taking away your ability to do this, but we're giving you this. First of all, nothing in the statute changes the percentage interest that are required to vote on any declaration amendment. So let's say you have a 2/3 requirement. You have to get 2/3 of your homeowners to agree to any declaration amendment.
Okay.
All you're doing is just removing a person that's able to vote. It doesn't change that 2/3. And so now, instead of them possibly voting yes on the amendment, they're always going to be a no. They're just going to be assumed a no because they're not allowed to vote. So in reality, it hasn't really changed anything as far as the HOA's ability to pass rental amendments. Most of the times, like I said, most of the times the investors are going to be a no anyway, if they even vote.
Gotcha. So they're not really, that does frame it very differently. So you just need 2/3 of that population to say yes.
Correct. And it doesn't change. It doesn't say, okay, we'll take that house out. It just says they can't vote on it. So it automatically makes them a no vote.
Interesting. So, okay. I guess I feel better about that because that almost felt like the classic, taxation without representation. Like,
Yes.
I have no vote in what you do and you can do anything you want, which could work against my interests. But it sounds like it's kind of baked in that you have a default no vote, I guess,
Yes.
on that.
Which didn't change anything. I mean, it's almost like, some of these mom and pop that decided not to sell their house, but bought a new house and are renting their old house. Those people might have actually voted yes on the rental cap.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now they have no ability to do so. And it also, and I know this is not the subject of this podcast, it also puts a lot more onus on this board and on the managers of these homeowners associations to figure out whether somebody has a homestead.
Yeah.
And so we've talked about it internally as a firm is what are we going to do when there's a vote on this? Are we going to require the property managers to look and see if there's a homestead exemption? Because even if there isn't a homestead exemption, that doesn't mean it's not a homestead.
Right.
And so it actually puts a lot more onus on these associations to do these things.
Presumably it would be the address, the mail to address, right? Assuming, if they mail due slips, if they have access to that, and if there's a mismatch, they're probably not.
Which there are all the time. Or let's say I want for my dad, I received a lot of his mail. He had a homestead.
Yeah.
But he had his property taxes sent to me because it was easier that way.
Yeah.
And so, and that's a very specific example, right. But it's just another one of the issues I have with the legislature, and I've spoken with various members about this, is when they try to figure out what problem they're going to solve, they need to talk to the people that deal with that problem. Right. And that would allow them to come up with a better solution rather than trying to pass laws that they think solves the problem, but actually brings up new issues.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's what a lot of the lobbyists do is they help try to come up with a solution. Okay, what are you trying to fix? What's your issue? Let's come up with a solution that makes more sense.
Yeah.
This year's legislature actually passed a large number of HOA laws, which is not the case typically.
Interesting.
And so when I say that they are all about property rights, a lot of that has to do with HOAs too. So it's not just landlords it's property rights. They've been trying to take away the abilities of HOAs to do certain things too.
Interesting. So, Laura, I think it's, if you're out in the world and you read anything, that there's an affordability issue we have as a country, as probably a state, and, everybody blames it on supply. And I think there's, some wisdom to that. I think some people would argue it's other issues, but let's talk about just supply, because it does seem, and I've had other people on this podcast talking about this, is that every city is resistant to allowing more lax zoning things. I think there's been some stuff more recently maybe come through that, could change some of that. But where do you see this going? I guess on the whole scheme of things, we got rental caps, we've got zoning issues. And what I mean by that is it's a zoned single family residential lot. Mm-hmm. And someone says, I want to build a fourplex on here and sell them as condos, for example, or I want to put a duplex here so two people can have a home instead of one. But there's all this resistance, it seems like, against that as to creating more density. And what we have, and we're not unique, is this sprawl. It's like, well, let's just build this massive radius of single family homes and let's not worry about density. Let's just, it's okay if you have to drive an hour to work, because, our geography has to expand and expand as we come further away from the city center. But what do you make of all this? Like, where do you think this may be going? I know you don't have a crystal ball, but I'm just curious your thoughts on it.
I think the municipalities are seeing it as a sort of a twofold issue. On one hand, they are not necessarily getting as much taxes from lower cost housing as they would, especially single family lower cost housing, as they would higher cost single family housing.
Sure.
And so their incentives to allow a $150,000 house versus a $400,000 house are pretty low.
Yeah.
just because with the property taxes, they're not getting as much from that $150,000 home versus the $400,000 home.
Yeah.
And they also have their current voter base is people who have the more expensive homes, especially in these municipalities such as Fishers, Noblesville, maybe not Noblesville as much, Carmel. They have this mentality of, yes, we should allow this, but not in my backyard. I don't want it near me.
Right.
And having the density, so having an apartment complex built next door to my house, not only will likely lower my property values, it also means my roads are going to be worse. The traffic's going to be worse. The school size is going to be different. Noblesville has a unique problem where our class sizes are actually decreasing, which is damaging the schools, which is odd given how many houses are being built.
Yeah,
but
that is odd.
I mean, our schools recently came out and said they are having to lay off people, not necessarily because the class sizes are smaller, but because of property taxes are low. So they're getting less money from the state in order to run the schools. But I mean, like I said, we have a new neighborhood coming in right next to us, and every day one of us on the street is talking about, well, what's going to happen at that stoplight? Or when are they going to build a roundabout there?
Yeah.
Because I mean, traffic's already bad. Trying to get out of my neighborhood, it's a 10-minute wait to get to the next street over.
Oh my gosh.
It's just a one stop sign. And so now that we're going to have another 250 houses, what's that going to look like?
Yeah.
And so I think people like the idea of this lower cost housing, but they say, well, I don't want it near me though. Like, where else could it be?
Yeah.
and they ultimately, and those are the people that vote for your city councilors, that vote for the mayor, that vote for all the people that make these decisions.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think it's interesting. You know, you bring up the fact that, okay, I like this, but I don't want it near me. And I'll give you just a quick story. I lived in first house we ever bought, my wife and I, was in South Broad Ripple. Then we moved out to the suburbs and we lived out of the, the Beltway for, 20 years probably. And then we moved closer to downtown. And I remember a guy that was doing a very large flip on Central Avenue. Okay. And talking like 15th, 14th and Central, somewhere around there. And this was like a $2 million home. Like they were trying to retail it for like $2 million. And I remember driving by it and talking to a downtown realtor and going, wow, it's near an apartment building. That can't be good for it. And the realtor looked at me and said, that's what it is down here. And that kind of opened my eyes up, because now I live, in this very similar area. And we don't have like this 700 unit apartment buildings, but we have, those kind of boutique apartment buildings that are sprinkled all through the
12 apartments, 10 apartments. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're everywhere. And it's just kind of what we have. It's kind of like part of our, makeup. And maybe you just got to get used to it a little bit. Maybe that's going to be what we have to, you just have to say, well, I live in a more densely populated area, and this is what comes with that. And I know that's maybe not what you signed up for. People that are listening to this that live in Carmel or Fishers, I totally get that. But it could be, what it's going to end up having to be to accommodate all these people and in the areas that they want to live, because there's only so much land that we can build on. And instead of sprawling out, the idea is, do we go up? So just a real quick thing on your analogy of, okay, I have a $150,000 single family home versus, I think you said, a $450,000 single family home. That's a massive tax difference. There's a lot of dollars there that the city could earn by not allowing the 150. But what if they allowed 4 $200,000 condos? Right? In that same plot. Then you say, well, we can home 3 more people, presumably 3 more homeowners, let's say, and our tax base increases. But the resistance to that, because you're going to see those orange signs pop up, which people that live here know, you got to get that variance of use, and the remonstrators come down and say, no, I don't want a fourplex next door to me or on my street. That's going to have to be the mind shift we have, I think, as a city and as an area in central Indiana, to make real change. I just don't know that we're there yet. I think that's going to be a hard pill for some people to swallow.
And I don't disagree with you if it were just that. The problem is I don't think it is profitable for developers to make just a few condos or just a 2-building apartment complex.
Absolutely. Yeah. They have
It's
to have
just
density.
not profitable for them to do so. And so even though those would be something that's easy to swallow and something that would make sense, and you say, you know what, you're right. I could stand to have these small condos next to us there's 15 of them or there's 20 of them.
Yeah.
That's just, developers aren't going to build it.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
and a lot of that is the cost of construction is too high. They're not going to make enough money. The cost of permits are too high. And some of it, and this goes back to the municipalities, is some of the finishes that the municipalities require just make it too expensive.
Right. Yeah. There's some barriers there for sure. Yeah.
And so it's not just not in my backyard. It's also, these developers have to have the incentives to do it. And the cities don't have enough money to do what they're doing, let alone give developers the incentives to do it. I know that there are a lot of federal tax incentives. I don't know much about that. I don't know if those are continuing on with our administration now. I don't know. But that was a lot of the ways, and a lot of those only made sense if you were doing hundreds of apartments versus having 12.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
Yeah,
and so I do think that those are the differences between, you're not going to find somebody with a 12 apartment building in Noblesville that they're going to build brand new. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah. They need more scale. I mean, there are some very, boutique, I'll say what I call like fill-in builders. Like there's one in my neighborhood that's built some beautiful homes on vacant lots but there's just one, right? I mean, there's just one vacant lot comes available and they build a home and then they can sell it. But
sometimes it's a duplex.
Yeah. And there's some of that going on too. Yeah.
But that's a different demographic than, or not different. It's just different in downtown Indianapolis.
It is. It is. It's not a good comp for like what's happening in Hamilton County, but
yes.
All right. Well, Laura, I appreciate all this. Is there anything else legislatively or things? I mean, you're in court all the time that you're seeing that landlords kind of need to be aware of. There's maybe some trends you're seeing develop.
I think a landlord should be expecting a lot more tenant-driven lawsuits.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think you and I spoke about this earlier. It is just the use of AI has really allowed tenants, in some instances, to exert their rights that they didn't know necessarily they have. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. But it has also allowed frivolous litigation, and it also has allowed tenants to cause issues, whereas before they didn't know such a law existed.
Yeah.
And it is even in situations that the landlord might not even be doing anything wrong, but the way that this tenant inputted it into AI has told them, yep, these are the 8 different laws that have been broken. And then it's the onus is on the landlord to prove that that's not the case.
Right.
And it's taking more legal resources. It's taking more time from property managers. It's taking more effort to fix those. And I do think, and I don't know how often, I think you and I spoke about fraudulent applications. Yeah. I assume AI is helping with that too.
Oh, absolutely. It has for a while in terms of like fake pay stubs, but I mean, they're in some ways almost indistinguishable from a real pay stub, but no, I would agree. We could probably talk about this for a very long time, but never seen the complaints and things like that have hit us over the last, let's say, year. It's a different world we live in. And if you're a landlord out there who self-manages and isn't like totally dialed in to what your requirements are and have a lease that has been vetted very carefully, every line for how you should operate and things that you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do, you're at a higher risk now than ever, because every person out there has, right, wrong, or indifferent, how they truly feel about it, a legal assistant at their disposal, that can search landlord-tenant law. We've had some people come to us and it was just plain wrong. Like we talked about this. They used the wrong prompt or whatever. But that doesn't stop them necessarily.
It does. And that's where these legal resources, I have so many clients that say, why am I going through this? I shouldn't have to.
Yeah.
You're right. I mean, it's unfair But unfortunately, it's just part of doing business. And I tell clients a lot, I am a cost of doing business.
Yeah.
Most of the time. Sometimes I help you sell properties, I help you buy properties, things like that are happy parts. But most of the time I am a cost of doing business. And it's just something that's going to have to be factored in. And ultimately, I think it all boils down to this is going to increase people's rents.
It very well could.
Somehow the costs have to be shown. I mean, somehow these landlords aren't going to be able to absorb a $2,000 or a $5,000 legal bill without raising rents at some point in time.
Yeah. And it will probably cause some people to exit. We've seen that all of as a direct result of AI. I haven't heard anybody say, well, I'm selling because of AI, but it's just another compounding factor. And I've talked about on this podcast. It's like, I think it's harder to make it work today as a landlord than it ever has been for just a lot of different factors of cost of construction, interest rates, insurance. Scott and I just went through an insurance renewal, and wow. I mean, just the money that we spend every year on insurance, and then in a few weeks, taxes will be, or actually 2 or 3 weeks, taxes will be due. So it's
like 10 days, 11 days.
Yeah. It's just, there's a lot there. And AI just does not look, it can make your life easier in some ways. If you need to, consult with something about an issue with AI, the prompts are where it is, and you should never create a document that you're going to actually use live without an attorney reviewing it, because you could get yourself in trouble. But yeah, it's a different world we live in right now. There's no doubt. And you really have to be doing business at a very high level, or you're going to get called out on it. And that's just the reality of where we are.
I agree. And like you said, AI is useful in some extent. I do also want to point out, and this is something that we've noticed recently, is a lot of the courts now have legal services available to the tenants.
Yeah.
And I actually, every time a lawyer is involved, I'm thankful, because it makes it easier. Because I think the legal services lawyers are actually very good, and they understand what the law is. They do try to sometimes make arguments that are not valid arguments. I think most lawyers would at least try that. But I have noticed that they do have more access to legal services. Some of these courts have legal services there on certain mornings, and you can come if you have a pending case, even if it's not that day, you can come and talk to the lawyers. And so I do think that landlords should be prepared to just know that tenants have more legal resources available to them now through AI, as well as just sort of in person.
Yeah.
And that is helpful.
Yeah. I think it's helpful too. I mean, I think it's, when the tenant knows that's why, you talked about this a little bit earlier, when they struck down the tenant bill of rights, we love that. Actually, we still use it, Laura. We still put it in our lease, because we want them to know what they're entitled to and what they're not entitled to. It lays it out. And I think I love it. We've had it for years, and we'll continue to put it in there. So, well, Laura, thanks for being here. I appreciate all your insight.
No problem. Thank you, Jeremy.
Yeah. We hope everyone has picked up some information that will help them in their investing. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another podcast. Until next time, thank you so much for listening, and please stay invested in your investment.